Well, I really didn't want to make this video. What I'd prefer to do is be outside right now, especially on this beautiful spring day, showing you what it's like to live in Oregon, which is what our channel does. It focuses on showing you what it's like to live in the Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area. But I listened to a podcast recently that many of you may have also listened to. It's called The Daily from the New York Times. And I say many of you also may have listened to it because it is one of the top podcasts by subscribers. The episode was titled, "The Housing Market Has New Rules. Realtors are evading them." And I feel like it's really a big disservice to anybody that's thinking about buying or selling a home. The rules come as a recent settlement with the National Association of Realtors. And in this video, I'm going to take you through the rules to see if they match what was said in this podcast. I'm also going to share with you a lot of candid information about how realtors operate, at least how realtors that I know operate. Whether you're a home buyer, a home seller, or maybe even a realtor, you won't want to miss this episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel Living in Oregon. I am your host, Seth Marchant, licensed real estate broker in the state of Oregon and Washington. Or if you're new to this channel, Living in Oregon, like I mentioned, we show you what it's like to live around the Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area. Lots of videos of pros and cons, cost of living, neighborhood tours, the occasional real estate market update, videos that are really going to familiarize you with the area. And kind of like I mentioned, I don't really have too much interest in doing a video like this. I actually did a video around the time of the settlement to explain to people what these new rules are going to mean, how they're going to affect things going forward. And because so many of you that watch this channel have reached out to us over the years to buy or sell a home, I think it's going to be beneficial to revisit that and see what's transpired since then and see how much of what that podcast from the Daily actually matches the lawsuit. I'm going to go through and we're going to see how much of the podcast from the Daily actually matches the settlement, specifically the rules. I'm going to include a link for that settlement. It's over 100 pages, but I'm going to include a link in the description if you want to see for yourself, and I'm going to be referencing that throughout this video. And I'm also going to try and keep this as objective as possible. I am a real estate broker, and I'm also human. So I am not without bias, just like everybody else is. And if you've watched this channel for a while, I'd like to think that you've gotten to know me, and you probably know that I like to call it how I see it. A lot of people that have watched the channel and reached out to me over the years have specifically told me that one of the reasons that they wanted to work with me is because of my forthcoming nature. So with that being said, if you are a home buyer, a home seller, maybe an attorney, because we're going to get to some legal stuff, or just anybody that has an opinion on this, I welcome you to leave a comment below. Tell me what you think that I got right or wrong. I will read them all. Anybody that's going to take the time to reply to this video, I appreciate. Now let's dig into it.
From the New York Times, I'm Michael Barbaro. This is The Daily. Last year, a historic legal settlement created sweeping new reforms that were supposed to lower the price of buying and selling a home across the country. But those reforms would cost realtors money. And so those realtors, it turns out, have found ways to evade the new reforms. My colleague, Deborah Kamen, explains how they did it.
Okay, so the first thing here, I do recall a lot of headlines at the time saying that this could potentially lower home prices. I don't know if any of those headlines were by actual economists, but I know there are some housing economists that have weighed in on these things, and none of the ones that I follow said that housing prices were actually going to go down as a result of this settlement. The premise there is that you're going to remove a fee or lower a fee from this transaction, and thus people are going to pay less money for houses. Now, I'm not an economist, and I'm sure a lot of people aren't economists that are watching this, but if we just think about that logically. If you owned a home and some part of the equation, some fee was removed or lowered from your home sale, would you sell your home for less than it's worth? I probably did mention this in my last video. I didn't believe that home prices were going to go down as a result of this. And sure enough, home prices did not go down as a result of this.
It's Tuesday, April 29th. Deborah,
Michael,
welcome back to the Daily.
it's nice to be here again. Good to
It's
see
really
you.
nice to see your face
In the flesh.
in the flesh. So a year ago, as many listeners I hope will remember, you came on the Daily to describe this really bombshell legal settlement that was supposed to transform how homes are sold in the United States. And I want to start by having you remind us what that settlement was all about and why it was we felt wrongly, as it turns out, that this was going to be such a watershed moment.
The expectations were sky high. The words that were being used by economists and analysts in the industry, earth-shattering, watershed, landmark, the greatest change for the real estate industry since the New Deal. Things that were really pinning hopes that this was going to shake up a stagnant housing market and offer real relief to consumers in the US who desperately need it. And a lot of that was pinned to the idea that rules were going to be followed to the letter, and they were not. So here we are a year later, and things have shifted a tiny bit, but we're talking about a drizzle, not a watershed.
Just take us back.
Now, before we go on, I just want to point out, again, I'm sharing a link to this settlement in the description of this video. So if you want to see the rules for yourself, you can. Again, it's over 100 pages. I know most people are probably not going to dig through that. I am going to give you kind of some of the bullet points for the rules at the end of this video, and we're going to talk about the rules throughout this video.
Back to the settlement.
So to take you back to the settlement, we actually have to go back a little bit further to October of 2023, when the National Association of Realtors, which is the trade organization that really oversees the real estate industry, they are the largest trade group in the United States. They are hugely powerful. They have a ton of money and a really massive amount of power and influence because of their lobbying arm.
Right, you described them as so powerful that they've trademarked the word real estate agent.
The word realtor, yes.
Yes,
It is a
sorry.
trademark of NAR. So you can only use it if you are a member of this group. And they have a lot of members, 1.5 million. They have more members than there are houses for sale in the US. So we're talking a very big, very powerful group. They were sued by a group of home sellers in Missouri. The idea behind the lawsuit was that their rules had essentially fixed prices on real estate commissions, inflated them, and made it so that real estate commissions were higher than they should have been. They did not expect to lose this lawsuit, but they did lose this lawsuit. And a jury agreed that they were fixing prices on real estate commissions.
Right, and I remember from our first conversation that price-fixing claim really revolves around the amount of money that you owe the agents that comes out of selling a house.
Yeah, the dreaded 6%. It comes out of your pocket if you're selling. And anyone who's ever bought or sold a house knows that when you sit down with your agent, it's overwhelming, it's confusing, and it gets wonky. No one really asks, how are these commissions paid? And
It's just kind of there.
right. And you also have enough things to worry about that you don't get into the weeds about how these commissions are paid. But for real estate agents, for realtors, this is how they make their living. This is very important. It's literally their bread and butter.
Again, I welcome anybody to comment below. So I'm curious, anybody that's sold a home before, was that your experience? Were you unaware of what the commission was going to be?
And this settlement was meant to shake up the system of how those commissions are determined and how they're paid.
Right. No longer were they simply tablets handed down from God on the mountain. In the real estate industry, they were subject potentially to negotiation, conversation, and potentially they could go way, way down, maybe even go away.
We are wandering the desert now. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, it was meant to say, this is the way it's been done for a long time. The way it's been done has actually been anti-competitive. It's blocked competition. Now it's changed. Now home sellers can say, I want to pay X, I want to pay Y. It's up to you how much commission you want to pay.
Right. And that brings us back to our superlatives.
To be clear, real estate commissions have always been negotiable. And there's always been real estate brokerages, such as discount brokerages. We'll actually get into that a little bit later in this video, that do offer real estate services for less than the traditional percentage.
Because if suddenly a 6% commission on a home sale might not be 6%, but might be 5 or 4 or 3 or whatever, then suddenly home prices might change, might go down.
That is what economists predicted because commissions are actually baked into home sale prices. When you sit down with a realtor before you sell your home, and there's all this paperwork and all this mumbo jumbo, one thing you generally do is you have a conversation. This is how much commission you're going to pay me as your agent. So as a result, we're going to set the price for the home here so that when that commission is paid out, you still take home as much as you want.
Mm-hmm.
And if commissions go down, if you're only paying 5%, a 1% reduction in home prices across the board in the US is a massive dent in the housing market that actually really should.
So again, anybody that's sold a house or even thinking about selling a house, I invite you to weigh in on the comments. If you had to pay, say, 1% less than what was maybe expected, would you sell your house for less than you could possibly sell it for?
Open things up for a housing market that is so tight and so restrictive for so many buyers.
Right.
So we were really optimistic that it was going to change things.
So let's talk about the big and then moment in this story of why all this promised superlative change has not come to pass.
I call it the great real estate workaround.
Very intriguing.
Thank you.
Explain.
The settlement was designed to take away these conversations that agents were having about commissions. These conversations were happening over these channels, these databases. They're called MLSs, multiple listing sites.
Right. These are online portals used by real estate agents to basically list a house.
Exactly. It's
Put it
where
up for sale.
home listings live on the internet. And if you're an agent and you're working with a buyer and you're looking for houses, you go to the MLS to see what houses are for sale. But each listing has information on it, the address, the square feet, etc. It also used to have
If you want to skip to it, the settlement was explicitly not designed to take away these conversations. So in the link that I'll share for you, it's practice changes. Paragraph F, it's going to start on page 97. That's where the rules begin. I know it kind of looks like a lot of legal verbiage. Again, I'll give you bullet points towards the end, but it specifically does say in here that real estate brokers can and are supposed to have conversations about these things, just not on the MLS.
a commission amount.
This is probably the place where we need to remind everyone that commissions tend to be split, right, between the agent for the buyer and the agent for the seller.
Yes, almost universally,
Even though it comes out of the seller's pocket.
the seller pays the commission to their agent, and that agent for the sellers then splits that commission with the buyer's agent.
Right.
That's how it has been done for a long time.
Okay, that's roughly correct. I just want to point out that when you're a buyer and you have a buyer's agent, we are not privy to what the seller is paying their seller's agent. It would be common that whatever the total commission is, let's say it's 6%, let's say it's 5%, that it would be split down the middle. So let's say if it's 5%, 2.5% to the seller's agent, 2.5% to the buyer's agent, but we never actually get to see what the seller's agent is getting paid. So there might be cases where it's not split.
And MLS just kind of laid it all out.
Yes, and the key focus of this settlement was that should be no more. Moving forward, post-settlement, the rules said that sellers pay their own agents, buyers pay their own agents. If you work with a real estate agent, it's up to you to pay them.
Okay, again, I invite you, if you'd like to look through, there is nowhere in the rules of this settlement that says that this is supposed to be split and that sellers pay their seller's agent and buyers pay their buyer's agent. Nowhere does it say that in the rules.
That was what was supposed to happen, which should have brought a lot more competition and negotiation into the marketplace.
What workaround could work around that?
Well, the settlement was very specific in its language, that these conversations about splitting commissions could not happen on these databases. So the real estate community was like, oh.
Now that is correct. That is one of the rules. One of the new rules is that the buyer's agent commission is no longer allowed to be advertised on the MLS.
Okay, we'll just move these conversations elsewhere. It never said we can't have them at all. And I don't mean this is happening in secret.
Hello, my name is Kevin Sears, and I am the 2024 president of the National Association of Realtors. Today, I'd like to touch on a couple of things.
Just a few days after the settlement,
Now, in the settlement, there are a couple of key pieces. One is financial, the other is rules. Now let's talk about the rules. And there's two in
The president of NAR made a video that went out to every realtor in the group.
Please hear me clearly. You will still be able to offer compensation to a buyer broker. It just cannot be conveyed on the MLS.
That said, to move these conversations.
And if there's one thing I know about members, they will figure out how to efficiently communicate the information to see if there will be any cooperating compensation.
That video was backed up by NAR's head of legal, who has doubled down on the idea that in the settlement, the language says these conversations are banned only on the MLS.
So just know that we're doing everything we can to continue to advocate for your ability to help buyers, sellers, tenants, and landlords all across our great country.
So where exactly do these conversations move to once the premier trade group of the realtor world says to them, go be creative and find a new place to have these conversations?
Michael, it's gotten a little bit wild. I've spent the past year following this very closely, talking to agents, talking to industry insiders. Remember, the 6% was split 50-50. So usually the seller and the buyer's agent would each get 3%. I've heard stories of agents who in listing photos are putting 3 cookies on the kitchen table as a sign to a buyer's agent. If you bring a buyer, you'll get 3%, which means they'll get their 3% also.
Oh, wow, that's quite nefariously creative.
It's one way to put it. I've heard other stories of agents who've put movies on the TV screen in the living room.
During a showing of the house.
During a showing, or even in the listing photo, there's a movie playing, but it's a movie that has 3 in the title, like The 3.
I've seen some of these things too, although there is no reason to be coy about it, such as putting 3 cookies on a table. Oftentimes, these will be advertised on a for sale sign in the front yard. Buyer's agent commission, 2.5%. Buyer's agent commission, 3%. And that's because, as I mentioned, there's nothing in the rules that prohibits that. In fact, the rules were designed to encourage that, to simply take these conversations away from the MLS, and I think also just to create these conversations. Part of the complaint, and I'll include the complaint in the description if you'd like to see that as well, part of the complaint was simply that people just weren't aware that these things were negotiable, so they wanted these conversations to be happening more, not less.
Amigos.
Oh my gosh. A real kind of open winking of defiance.
Yeah, some of them are much more old-fashioned. We're talking emails, phone calls, texts. Some of them are really tech-savvy. There's one agent in Virginia. She's an influencer on TikTok.
I'm just Liz, and I sell real estate in Charlottesville and Richmond, Virginia, and this is the way we're going to do it.
She just said, okay, you can't go on the MLS.
I'm sure someone's going to have another way, but I'm going to build a landing page.
And she's created a landing page that other agents can use.
Easy peasy for every one of my listings. And on that landing page is going to be all the information that any buyer's agent would need to know, so I can easily just, poof, text it to them. Here you go.
It enters all the homes they have for sale into their separate non-MLS site, compiles their data, and includes the commission.
So this is pretty open and creative and perhaps legal flouting of this ruling and settlement. How much, Deborah, do you think that this represents real estate agents thinking to themselves, look, this is how we get paid. Our work is important to the process. We are essential. And many people will tell you that they're, especially on the seller side, broker, work their tush off, increase the value of their home. Maybe not everyone.
There's data that says that people who use real estate agents tend to get a higher price.
There it is. I mean,
there could be confounding variables to that data. Those people could have more money, could have higher priced homes.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things. But yes, there is a lot of data to back it up.
So isn't this the equivalent of agents creatively fighting to keep the equivalent of a waiter's 15% tip? It's like it's what they need to live.
Yes, and it's important to understand this is not happening organically. In many, many ways, real estate agents are just doing what they've been told by the National Association of Realtors to survive in an industry that is cutthroat. Again, we're talking more agents than listings. There are not enough houses to go around, and agents do not work for companies. They're independent contractors. They pay their own taxes. They split their commissions with their brokerages. For the people on the ground, this really is a life or death moment for their career. So they feel we're being told we should have the conversations elsewhere.
And so they are.
Why would they not, right? It's their job. But if you talk to the legal team that argued the settlement, they would say, sharing is caring. unless we're talking about real estate commissions, and then sharing is collusion. And the real losers are home sellers because the settlement was supposed to drive down prices.
Right. So how effective have the great workarounds that you're describing here been in preventing the reforms and reductions in price that we thought this settlement was going to usher in?
Initial data shows that these workarounds have been very effective at preventing the reforms. There have been a handful of studies in the real estate industry looking at how commissions may or may not have moved. The data is problematic because most of them are being carried out by people in the real estate industry, so they have a vested interest in the data. That makes the data less than reliable for reporting processes. But one study by one real estate media company showed that in the months after the settlement, commissions dropped about 0.5 percentage point across the board, which is a lot of money. It's not this watershed that we thought was going to happen, but it's something. 2 other studies, one was carried out by Redfin, which is also a brokerage,
Right.
and one was carried out by a real estate accounting technology company, so they have a vested interest in this data, say commissions haven't moved at all. So the American home seller is not getting any relief at a time when they desperately need it. So
Okay, so right there, she just said the American home seller is not getting any relief. I'm not sure if she actually meant that. If you have not followed the real estate market, real estate home values from 2020 to 2021, so year over year, went up 20%, and then went up about the same from 21 to 2022. So if the year 2000, at the beginning of the year, you owned a $500,000 house, that house was worth $600,000 a year later. A year after that, it's worth $720,000. So it's, and she mentioned earlier that this was supposed to bring relief into the real estate market, but the sellers have made out very, very well. It's really the buyers that need relief because buyers are having to compete. And sometimes, like you've probably heard, paying over list price. So it's not the sellers that are hurting right now. It's really the buyers that could use some relief.
we can use that data, but we don't want to rely on it because of the conflict of interest. What is more telling are the conversations I've had reporting on this for the past year. I've talked to dozens and dozens of home sellers and buyers.
Right, the ones interacting most directly with the commission structure.
Yeah, so this is anecdotal data, but there's a lot of it. And they are all telling me that not only are there workarounds, they're more aggressive than ever, and they're more frustrating than ever. Some sellers are so frustrated that they're saying, I'm just going to go it alone. I'm going to sell my house on my own and cut realtors totally out of the equation.
Find a workaround around the workaround.
A workaround around the workaround around the workaround. But, Michael, you used a biblical reference earlier about Mount Sinai. I'm going to use another one. We're really in a David versus Goliath.
Sellers selling their home on their own without a realtor is nothing new. For sale by owner, also known as FSBO. It's happened as long as probably homes have been for sale. As long as we've had a real estate market, as long as we've had realtors, there's always been for sale by owner. In fact, if you go to any of your favorite real estate websites right now, Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, whatever it may be, you can filter homes that are listed on there for sale by owner. In fact, oftentimes they tend to stick out like a sore thumb. They oftentimes do not have professional photography. They're oftentimes priced quite a bit higher than you might expect, or than what maybe the market value is, or than what these real estate websites suggest that the home's worth. Zillow's got their Zestimate. Those things aren't always exactly accurate, but oftentimes they can be pretty accurate. And oftentimes people selling their home for sale by owner list their homes higher than the market value and consequently tend to sit on the market for longer.
A sort of situation where you have these individual sellers who want to sell their very valuable asset, and an entire industry of realtors who are very committed to maintaining the status quo, mobilizing together to fight them every step of the way and make it extremely difficult to work around the system.
We'll be right back. So, Deborah, tell us about some of the sellers who tried to go it alone because they're so frustrated with the world of realtors, with the commissions and the status quo, and about the resistance that, as you said just before the break, they encounter when they try to do that.
Michael, let me tell you about one of them.
Day 2 of trying to sell my house without an agent in one of the most rigged real estate markets in the country.
His name is Mike Chambers. He's a home seller in Boulder, Colorado.
They try to make this impossible.
but I have a plan.
Okay, so I actually
And I first became aware of him because a source sent me a video on Instagram that Mike had made.
All right, let's clear something up, because from the first video, I think a lot of people assume I think realtors are useless. And the truth is I don't, but I do think that most drastically overvalue their services. And in Colorado specifically, they kind of operate like a cartel. So here's my take.
He created a handle called Realtors Hate Me, and he was chronicling the process of selling his house himself without an agent.
Are you okay if I record our call?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, fabulous. So
I called him to find out what was going on, and he told me his story. Mike is a former professional athlete and entrepreneur.
Like, I have no background in this whatsoever. I've been thrown into this, honestly. I didn't really think too much about the real estate industry until about 4 weeks ago, when I decided that I wanted to list my house myself.
And Mike has a really nice house.
And, you know, I've got a great house. It's turnkey. It's in a desirable location in a desirable city.
It's worth probably about $2.75 million.
A really nice house.
Really nice house, turnkey, renovated.
I spent the past couple months having some conversations with local agents regarding potentially listing my home.
He decided to put it on the market. He interviewed a handful of real estate agents.
And in those conversations, I asked the questions that I would of any sort of service provider that I would be interviewing, to get a sense of like how they were going to provide value.
He knew about the settlement. He had read the reporting. He knew that things were supposed to be different now. There was supposed to be room for negotiation.
You know, I couldn't find an agent who was willing to go below 2.5% to list my house.
Every single seller who came.
Okay, so when he says he could not find an agent that was willing to go below 2.5%, I don't think he's being specific there. I think what he actually means is he couldn't find an agent that was willing to go below 2.5% that was going to provide him with the services or do what he wanted that agent to do. As you'll hear in a moment, he does know how to use Google and he does know how to look up things. And like I mentioned before, there has always been discount brokerages. In fact, one of them is a very big brokerage, a very big national website. It's called Redfin. Have you ever heard their motto? It's home of the 1% listing fee. You can always find brokerages or realtors or people that are willing to offer services at a discount, but as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. So you typically don't get full service with those types of brokerages. So I know he's a smart guy, right? He's an entrepreneur. He's successful. So we know that he could have found an agent that was willing to list his home for below 2.5%. That, you know, that agent or that brokerage just wasn't going to do exactly what he wanted them to do at the price that he wanted to pay.
Came to his home, said, I'm not willing to negotiate, and wanted him to pay at least 5% commission.
It's going to be $140,000.
Right.
On a $2.75 million house, that's over $100,000.
Oftentimes it like equates to about 10 to 30 hours worth of work.
Exactly. For many people in this country, that
It is true that real estate transactions can vary quite a bit. In fact, I have asked other realtors in the past, what do you think the average amount of time that you spend with a client, from phone consultation to driving around showings, negotiations, paperwork, all those things? There's definitely no real estate transactions that only take 10 hours. The answers that I got, and again, cumulatively, adding up all the time that you spend on a transaction, a lot of realtors told me anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. Some said closer to 72 hours total. I think one of the funniest answers that I had was one agent said, as long as it takes, like one of those old school agents. And most of us are pretty time constrained, especially the ones that are successful. So we certainly value our time. But it is true that some transactions don't take as long as others, and others take a lot longer than your average transaction. And the thing that I always think to myself is that, quite frankly, you really don't want to be one of those transactions that takes longer. When it takes longer, that means that things aren't going necessarily according to plan, which is not uncommon in a real estate transaction, especially when you go through negotiations on the inspection and go through repairs, find things that you didn't expect to encounter. Takes you down a lot of different paths that you didn't expect to go down, which increases the amount of time that it takes in these transactions. And of course, these people like Mike are privy to all of the things that us real estate agents do in a transaction. Every time I'm doing something for a client, I'm not texting them or emailing them or calling them to tell them all the little details, all the little things that I'm doing for them behind the scenes. There's not enough time in the day to do those things. So to say that some real estate transactions only might take like 10 hours, isn't fair. It is fair to say that some are easier than others, but I always feel like just be thankful that yours wasn't one of those difficult transactions.
That's a salary for a year they could only dream of achieving.
And he could not figure out what the agents were going to do that was worth $100,000.
Because like you said, this house is ready to sell. It's pristine. So in his mind, it doesn't need the kind of attention, the kind of love, the kind of investment that a seller's agent can bring when a house is in rougher shape, when it needs work.
Yes.
It was a lot of money.
So I think oftentimes actually the opposite is true. When you have a valuable, desirable property, sometimes it can even make more sense to hire an agent that has more experience, that's going to charge the going rate, if not even a little bit more than a property that's tough to sell, a property that needs a lot of repairs. In real estate transactions, there's a lot that go into negotiations. It's a very nuanced thing, and little things can make a big difference in what your bottom line is. If you're selling a fixer type of property, it's actually probably not as important to hire a very experienced agent. It's definitely important to always have an experienced agent, but it's really probably more important with the higher dollar, higher value properties to have a really experienced agent that's gone through these transactions before, that knows how to negotiate, that knows how to get the most out of a buyer.
Everyone's like, well, you're being cheap. Like, it's such an expensive house. I'm like, it's my money. Like, I've worked hard to build this equity in this house, and I don't want to just give it away.
I'd be real surprised if a realtor said to this person that they were being cheap. That's not something that I would ever say to a client. And I can totally empathize with Mike. I know before I got licensed, the last house that I owned and sold, I had a similar inclination. It's like, what do these realtors do that they should get paid so much money? Like, I can probably do this myself. The amount of money that I'm going to pay a realtor, it almost feels like it's worth my time to do myself. But it's just one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. And as it was mentioned before, the data does show, and again, if you look at FSBOs, look at their time on market, look at what they're listing for, that people do get more money for their house when they use a professional. And so the realtor more times than not actually pays for themselves.
I want to pay someone for their services, of course, but I don't want to just light it on fire just because there's a system that's forcing me to. That seems kind of crazy.
And a lot of real estate agents obviously would disagree with this, but from Mike's opinion, this is his asset. He did not want to put forth $100,000 or more of the sale price to an agent, but nobody was willing to negotiate.
So anyhow, it all just felt weird. I just didn't like it. I was frustrated with it, and really just had this epiphany. Like, I'm a marketer. That's my background. So I felt confident in my ability to market the home.
So he said to himself, how hard can it be?
So I just decided to go for it.
I'm going to do it myself.
Famous last words.
And he began not just selling his house on his own, but chronicling the whole thing online for viewers and building a following as he did it.
Okay, and what happens once Mike decides to go it on his own based on all these frustrations with realtors in Boulder?
He starts running into roadblocks. He learns very quickly that the industry has made it much harder than he thought to sell his house. First of all, he knows that if he wants a buyer to come, he needs to offer commission to the buyer. He was willing to.
I'm just going to slow this down to make sure I understand.
Sure.
He knows he's going to have to offer some percentage commission to the buyer's agent. He himself is his own agent, so he's the seller's agent. That's taken care of.
It's almost like he's in court representing himself.
Okay.
So he knows if I want buyers to come, I should probably be willing to pay the buyer's agent commission.
So he's already winning in a sense because the commission he's paying is probably going to be, around half of what he would normally pay if he had to pay both the buyer and the seller's agent.
Exactly.
Now, that's pretty interesting, actually. I'd be curious to know what his logic is behind this. I've seen these debates quite a few times over the years online where people say, well, you only need a seller's agent. And then other people come into the comments and they say, no, the buyer's agent is much more important than the seller's agent. If you heard at the beginning of this podcast, they alluded to the seller's agent working their butt off and sort of alluded to the seller's agent being more important than a buyer's agent. So I think for a lot of people, the inclination is that the buyer's agent is less important. The seller's agent is actually more important. So really surprised to hear that he believed that he needed to pay a commission to the buyer's agent. In fact, a lot of people say, well, I'm paying my seller's agent. Okay, I get that. I get what the seller's agent is doing for me, but why would I pay the commission for the buyer's agent who is representing the buyer and probably going to negotiate against me? I'll save that for the end of this video, where I'm going to weigh a little bit more into how realtors operate. I'm going to explain to you why that can make sense at the end of this podcast.
So he's willing to pay that commission, and he wants to get the house listed on the MLS so people can find it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're not working with an agent, how do you list a house on the MLS?
I don't know.
He Googles it. He figures this out. There's companies that do this for you. But he lives in Colorado, and he quickly learns that in Colorado, there are laws that say if I'm going to list the house on the MLS, I have to also do a bunch of other stuff, and you have to pay me all this stuff. It's a rule designed by realtors to make it too hard to get your house listed on the MLS.
Okay, so that is true. If you just go to Google, like I mentioned earlier, I know he knows how to use Google. There's lots of companies that will post your home on the MLS for you, and they're not going to do anything else. It's usually just like a flat fee service. Now, I'm not familiar with Colorado's rules, of course, being in Oregon and also representing buyers and sellers in Washington. And if you didn't know, there's literally hundreds of MLSs all across the country. They're all a little bit different, but for the most part, I think that they operate the same. Now, I could see why there would be rules about who can do what on the MLS. The MLS is that place where us real estate brokers upload the data for our listings, things like bedrooms, square footage, lot size, bathrooms. There's literally hundreds of different data points, and making sure that you get all that information correct is very, very important, because buyers schedule showings based on this type of information. And sometimes buyers, like a lot of the buyers that we represent, are flying from outside of the state, and they are making decisions in their very limited schedule to see homes based on the information that we are getting from the MLS. So it's very important that the information on the MLS is accurate. Can't just have it be the wild, wild west. Us real estate brokers that use the MLS, if we make mistakes on there, if we make too many mistakes, there are penalties. And if we get enough penalties, we could actually be kicked off of the MLS. So I don't know what the rules are in Colorado, but I could certainly imagine that there are rules, and that's the reason why.
That was the tipping point for me, where I was like, this is a mess. This whole system is a mess.
Then he realizes that he wants to get his house listed on Zillow.
I should also mention too what she said just a moment ago. Realtors making it so that it's difficult for him to operate on the MLS. Us realtors have no control over the MLS. I'm part of multiple MLSs. I cover a lot of area in Oregon and also in Washington. So for that reason, I am part of multiple MLSs. We have no control over these MLSs, and most realtors that you'll find have lots of complaints about the MLS. We wish we had control over the MLS. So when they say realtors are making it hard with the rules on the MLS, that's not true. We don't have any control over the MLS.
Everybody uses Zillow and Redfin to search for houses.
In listing my house on Zillow, I learned that even Zillow has its own safeguards to push people to work with brokerages.
And he learns that Zillow actually has a program that homes that are sold for sale by owner, not with agents, are actually harder to find than homes that are listed by agents.
So the agents strike back again.
So basically, in real time, for all these people following on Instagram, he's discovering all these layers to the real estate industry that he didn't know existed.
So here I am. I can't get on MLS. Zillow's sort of stonewalling me.
So he gets the home on the market. He stages it. He takes photos. It's ready to go. Buyer's agents in Boulder know about his house.
Obviously, like, these videos are starting to go viral, and there's starting to be a conversation locally about my story in particular. And I start to hear some weird stuff.
And one day, one of them gives him a call and says, something's happening that you need to know about. Agents representing buyers at my company are talking to each other in text and in person, saying, we're not going to sell this guy's house because he's not playing by the rules.
So agents who might represent potential buyers who would love to have a $2.7 million turnkey house in Boulder are saying, we are not going to take our potential buyers to this house. We're going to boycott it.
There's a word for this in real estate. It's called steering. You're either steering buyers towards a certain home or away from a certain home, and you're not allowed to do it, but it happens all the time.
And what would be the explanation that these agents would have for steering people away from Mike's house?
There's no hypothetical. They gave the explanation in text messages that I saw when I was reporting.
Wow.
They told this other agent who wanted to bring buyers, why would you take buyers to a house with a seller who's working against the system, who's undermining the way things have been done? It was a boycott.
Okay, so she is correct in saying that it is against the rules to steer buyers. Can't speak for everybody else, but like I mentioned before, I do know a lot of realtors, and anybody that's worked with me can weigh in on this. I broker real estate transactions. I don't know that I've ever sold a house to a buyer. In other words, I never tell a buyer what house they think I should buy. It's extremely rare that a buyer might ask me that question, but if you do ask me that question, it's always going to be the same thing. I can't pick the house for you. I can give you pros and cons. I can give you all the information about the house. I can weigh in on the house's value, but I'm never going to tell you what house to buy. Now, what she just said about the text message, I actually had to go back and listen to that a couple of times. It's really hard to imagine what it is that she's describing. So apparently, a real estate agent shared a text message conversation with her. Presumably, it's not the one that was doing the steering. Presumably, it was one that was representing the buyer. Now, when we represent buyers, sometimes we'll talk to other agents about properties that our buyers are looking for. But no other agent is ever going to be privy to us writing an offer on a home. So I'm trying to imagine, how would this conversation have even taken place? How did these real estate agents start this text message conversation where one suggested to the other, why would you take buyers to a house of a seller that's working against the system? So let's say somehow another agent became privy to my offer, and I was the one receiving that text message. You'd have to imagine that, one, I listened to that agent and said, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm now no longer going to write that offer. I'm going to go ahead and just forego my duties to my clients, the buyers. I'm also going to just completely disregard my own self-interest. Like we heard, Mike was willing to offer 2.5% on $2.75 million. And so I'm not really sure what we're being asked to believe here, that some agent actually said, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to write that offer on that house. I'm not going to be a fiduciary and do my duties to my buyers, and I'm just going to forego that commission. It's very hard to believe. I don't know that this person from the New York Times would have completely fabricated this. My best guess, how she came about, if somebody did share a text message with her that said, why would you go to this seller that's working against the system? Perhaps a buyer wrote an offer and things didn't work out, and this was a conversation after the fact, although that wouldn't be boycotting, so that wouldn't make sense, but that's my best guess. They're really treating Mike like he's the very first person to try and list and sell his home on his own, like he's the first FSBO ever. Again, if you go to any website right now, like Zillow, you're going to find, I don't care what city you're in, there's FSBOs in every single city. And if somebody wants to sell their house on their own, I say more power to you. If Mike wants to do that, I think that's great. For all you buyers out there, if there's a for sale by owner, I know I'm never going to turn that down. I'm going to try and help you to work that deal. In fact, My own sister recently bought a FSBO. Why? Because she was in a market that there was very low inventory, like a lot of places, in a very competitive place, and she met somebody before they were listing their home. They had a really great connection, and I did everything I could to inform her to watch out for, like the red flags, to make sure that she wasn't going to get screwed over. And sure enough, she ended up buying a FSBO. And I think that's great for her. I think that's great for the seller too. If you want to go at it on your own, more power to you. But it's really hard to believe that an agent would boycott a seller again, just because the seller wanted to represent themselves. Again, it's very common to find FSBOs, but I'm going to take our word that that text message actually exists.
Who's undermining the way things have been done. It was a boycott.
So what ends up happening to Mike and to his house?
So Mike does find a buyer. There's a couple in Florida who sees the house on Zillow. They make an offer. He actually offers to pay a commission to the agent who's representing them.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, he actually pulled out of the sale because Mike decided, after seeing so much of the inside workings of the real estate industry, that he wants to start a business to try to fix it.
Wow.
So rather than moving his family to Costa Rica, which was his dream, he's now going to stay in Colorado for the time being and work on this startup company that he's created to try to change real estate commissions.
Fascinating.
And he
if you were selling your home on your own and you went through all of this heartache and then you actually found a buyer and you came to terms, and your dream was to sell your house and move to Costa Rica with your family and go live on the beach somewhere, would you cancel everything just because of an experience that you had with some other realtors? Again, what are we being asked to believe here? I just have to think that there's more to the story.
Told me about how it's not that he's trying to take down the real estate industry.
And I do think there's a critical role for real estate agents in the world, and I think this has never been my issue.
He believes that real estate agents are very important and sometimes are really useful.
Just allow me to act in my own best interest. And through this experience so far, it's felt like quite the opposite.
His message, though, which has been echoed by many other people I've spoken to in my reporting, is that you should be able to determine how much you want to pay for that service. And the industry is not allowing those conversations to come to the surface.
Yeah, you absolutely should be able to, and you are able to negotiate how much you want to pay for a service. Like I said before, though, you can find discount brokerages, but you can't compel a real estate agent to do certain things that you want to do for the price that you're going to dictate.
Good. All right. Great to meet you. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Right, because everything you found and he found is that one way or another, agents are still operating to a real degree in the shadows as they try to ensure that the commission structure that is supposed to be negotiable is actually not all that negotiable.
If you talk to economists and analysts in the industry, they will say the settlement was a massive breakthrough moment. If you talk to agents, many of them will say the settlement changed nothing. There is a huge gap.
Again, the video that I made originally on buyer's agent agreements, I did predict in that video that this was not going to change much based on the rules.
But understanding. And in the middle are agents on the ground just trying to make money and home sellers and buyers just trying to navigate the process. There's no clear communication here about how it's supposed to work.
So surely the government, regulators, know what.
There is clear communication about how it's supposed to work. It's written in the rules. And again, I did discuss that in my last video. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And like I said before, one of the purposes of this settlement was to bring more transparency. Now, whether it did or not, that's a different argument. In fact, not all MLSs are following these rules. In fact, one of the MLSs that I am a part of, the NW MLS, which covers Washington, has decided not to follow those rules. And their reasoning was because it actually brings less transparency. Now that you can't advertise the buyer's agent commission on the MLS for all to see, because realtors are trying to have other ways to communicate these things, whether it's cookies on the table, on the for sale sign, text messages, websites, phone calls, whatever it may be, The NWMLS actually felt like this rule brings less transparency to the process. And again, the whole purpose of the settlement, one part of the purpose of settlement, was to bring more transparency.
But maybe that's asking too much.
Well, they read us. They do.
Right. They know what you know based on your reporting, and they would seem to have a real interest in enforcing the original settlement in as broad a way as possible, right? So is that happening? Is there an effort underway to clarify some of this confusion that you are still seeing out there?
Yes and no. The Justice Department has been investigating the National Association of Realtors for years. There's been a back and forth with them for a very long time. The settlement was brought by private home sellers.
Right, it wasn't a government lawsuit.
It wasn't, but the DOJ was absolutely investigating NAR, and they continue to investigate NAR. Commissions and the conversations about commissions are a huge piece of that investigation. But the Justice Department has a lot of other things on their plate right now.
Right.
The government is very
There was a case brought by the DOJ, Department of Justice, in 2020, and it was dismissed in 2021.
busy and working with many fewer staff than they used to. So it's really anyone's guess how high of a priority this is and if there's going to be further enforcement. Is there an appetite for it? Yes, definitely.
Understood. I think it makes sense to end here with a little bit of news that you can use, which isn't exactly the space we normally occupy, but I'm just going to assume that somewhere in the universe of daily listeners are folks who are thinking of buying or selling their home, or perhaps are in the process of buying or selling a home, and could benefit from the journalistic wisdom that you have accumulated over the past year or so reporting on this. So what would you say to people who are trying to figure this out, perhaps aren't willing to do what Mike did, which is actually take charge of the whole process themselves, but they just want to be able to navigate the current dynamic in the best way possible?
If I've learned anything in the last year from reporting on this, it's that buying and selling a home is really scary and really overwhelming to the vast majority of people. Mike is an anomaly because he decided to just go with his own and kind of figure it out as he was going along. For most of us, it's really scary. I've sold a home. I remember sitting down with my agent. I had no idea what the stack of papers was in front of me, and we just agreed to whatever she said because we trusted her.
You, a real estate reporter, didn't ask about the commission.
I did not ask about the commission. I'm willing to say that to you, Michael, to your face. I did not ask about the commission. I think we paid 6%.
Right.
I honestly don't remember.
Again, I'm curious for the people watching, if you sold a home before, was that your experience? Was that never discussed? When you read through the listing agreement, did you not see what the commission was going to be? Sort of surprising that a reporter, somebody whose job it is to ask questions, would have never asked that question. And for us realtors, we know that our clients don't always know what questions to ask. When you work with me, I know what's important for you to know. If you don't ask me a certain question, I'm still going to make sure that you know it. And knowing what the commission is an important aspect of these transactions. So I'm always going to, whether it's a seller or a buyer, make sure that that's one of the many things that you know, even if you don't ask it. A little bit surprising to hear from this person.
If it happened to me, it can definitely happen to anyone who's listening to this. It is not a problem to pay 6% as long as you know what you've agreed to.
Which probably means asking.
My number one piece of advice is to understand, even if you're told you cannot negotiate on commissions, you can negotiate on commissions. And if the agent doesn't want to, you have the right to go find another agent. You also absolutely have the right to know what you are paying for and to ask the questions, okay, you're going to charge me this much money. What are you doing for that money? Just like you would with any other transaction.
It's my understanding, based on everything I have read, that this legal settlement has only officially been in place, I think, for a little bit less than a year.
Since August of last year, correct.
Exactly. So I wonder if there's a case to be made that as successful as all these workarounds have been, that it's still very early days, and that over time, the system could change to better benefit the consumer as they become more aware of guidance like what you're talking about here and of the new realities and rules that are now in place. Or if you think that the more time goes by, the more power that realtors and the realty industry will accumulate.
Michael, I asked this question to the lawyer who brought the case that resulted in the settlement and won it. His name is Michael Ketchmark. And what he said to me was pretty interesting. He said, Blockbuster Video, when movies started streaming...
Okay, now you're really taking us back.
Yes, I am. Back to the 90s. But Blockbuster did not shut down all of its stores the minute things started streaming. It took time.
Right. VHS didn't just go the way of the dodo overnight. It probably took, 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, it was a great transformation, just like he believes this will be a great transformation too. But these things do not happen overnight. We're talking about an industry that has been ruled by a group, NAR, for over 100 years.
Okay, we're almost to the end of the podcast. I've got a few last thoughts once we finish this podcast. The analogy is not great. VHS was replaced by DVD because DVD was better than VHS, and a lot of people would say now that streaming is better than DVD. I think this analogy actually kind of gets at the crux of what's wrong with some of these premises from this podcast and from a lot of headlines that came out in August and September when these rules were initially enacted. A lot of the headlines said, like they said, a watershed moment. This is going to be one of the biggest things in real estate in decades. And that whole premise sort of was based on this idea that there was going to be this new system, that there was going to be all of these new changes that were going to be so much better for the real estate transaction. And just like any other lawsuit, the settlement was really designed to satisfy the complaints of the plaintiffs. It's not like a bunch of real estate experts that really knew the industry kind of went through line by line and took all of this nuance and said, how can we make the system better? That's not what happened at all. Although if you read the headlines, that's what it felt like. And I think that's what might have led to a lot of confusion for people that were thinking that things were really going to change. I did hear from some people that said that they were really excited for this new system, this new way of doing things. And again, what I told a lot of people is we don't really expect there to be many changes, if any changes at all. Anybody that had this conversation with me back in late 2024, feel free in the comments to weigh in on what I said to you back then about what was going to change or lack thereof.
And only very recently have people started challenging the way things are done. So the people that I've spoken to in my reporting believe, yes, it is going to change, but it's going to take real time before those changes are clear and obvious and buyers and sellers feel the effects.
Well, Deborah.
Well, Michael.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, as always.
Okay, some final thoughts. I've been seeing a lot of people online, especially in the tech world, wanting to disrupt real estate, just like Mike, who canceled his life plans with his family to go to Costa Rica, decided to stay in Boulder to do. And let me show you what disrupting residential real estate transactions looks like. Tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars have been pumped into these efforts, and everybody has failed. And I'll admit, I agree with the premise. I consider myself a tech person. And at the end of the day, real estate brokers are a middleman, and middlemen can theoretically be inefficient. So if you eliminate that person, that group, then you can create more efficiency. In a world of things like blockchain, I can see the theory behind using tech to somehow disrupt the real estate industry. But again, it's one of those things where you just don't know what you don't know. And real estate brokers do a lot of things that tech just simply can't do for these transactions. There's so many things about these transactions that are so personal. It's highly nuanced. It's not something that an algorithm can necessarily figure out. And if somebody does, great, more power to you. The Oregon Relocation Team is not my first business. I have another business in advertising. And if real estate goes away, I will go on to find something else to do. So if people can find a better system that's better for the consumer, then great. I am all for it. One of the reasons why you would use a real estate broker It usually probably only takes 20, 30 transactions for sure. Once you get to like 50 or 100 transactions, again, one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. There are so many little different things that can come up in a real estate transaction that can kill a deal or that can really end up costing the client a lot of money if you don't have a professional there that has experience to figure these pieces of the puzzle out for you. So when you've only gone through a couple of transactions, like somebody like Mike, he just doesn't realize all of the different things that buyers and sellers experience, why you need a professional to navigate those things for you. I also mentioned to you earlier in this video, why would a seller pay a buyer's agent? When you are selling your home, the best way to get the most amount of money for your home is to make it as desirable as possible and to make it as competitive as possible. When you go to sell your home, there's going to be other homes that buyers are also looking at, and they're considering all of the various different factors, not just the price of your home or the condition of your home. They're considering some homes will only take conventional loans or only take cash. Some homes will take unconventional loans like VA or FHA. And those things can mean different fees to the buyers. One of those fees now could be the buyer's agent commission. If a seller does not want to pay the buyer's agent commission, and there's other homes that the buyer's looking at that are very similar and all things kind of being equal, they might choose another home that's willing to pay the buyer's agent commission so that they don't have to pay the buyer's agent themselves. So you make your home more competitive when that's the industry standard, that's the industry norm. The seller, as even Mike put it, feels like they need to pay the buyer's agent commission to bring the buyer. If all the other homes are doing that, if you're going to make your home competitive, if you don't do that, that's going to make your home less desirable to buyers. Now, again, you can read through these rules yourself in the document that I mentioned, and it's going to be in the description of this video. It starts on page 97, practice changes. If you don't want to read through all of this, but if any of you are unsure of some of this, I would actually encourage you to read it for yourself. I do have some bullet points about the rule changes, so you actually know what's in this document. So practice changes. So like we talked about, this eliminates commission on the MLS. Realtors are not allowed to put a commission on the MLS. MLSs are also supposed to, and it's kind of redundant, but eliminate the field where the agent would put the MLS, and also doesn't allow you to search for these sort of things. Next thing it does is prohibit free service claims. Now, I mentioned I know a lot of realtors, and I have an advertising agency. I've worked with realtors for the past decade and consulted personally thousands of realtors myself in just about every state throughout this country. And I have heard buyer's agents in the past say or want to advertise in our conversations that their services are free. And what they're basically saying is that the seller's going to pay the commission and you don't have to pay me, and I'm going to work for you for free. Well, it's a little bit misleading to say that. It's not totally free. It's just that you weren't going to pay the buyer's agent. And it is true that we do a lot of work, especially up front, for buyers without any sort of compensation. We don't get paid until close. But I could understand, for clarity, prohibiting people from saying that their services are free, because technically that's not true. The next rule is it requires buyer's agents to have a written agreement with their buyers. And again, that's what my video was back in 2024, where I initially covered this topic. So just like when you sell your house, you have to have a listing agreement with a listing agent. Now buyers will have to have a buyer's agent agreement in place specifically before they tour homes that are listed on the MLS. And with that is disclosure in these documents, whether you're a buyer's agent or seller's agent, there'll be disclosure that these things are negotiable. Prohibit filtering based on compensation. Again, it's removed from the MLS, so you can't filter those things. And again, it does explicitly say in the rules that it does allow off MLS compensation offers. So this was kind of one of the premises behind this entire podcast. Again, remember, the title of this podcast is The Housing Market Has New Rules. Realtors are evading them. This is one of the rules that they said is realtors are not supposed to have these conversations. Well, it does specifically say in the settlement that realtors are supposed to have these conversations, just not on the MLS. So between podcasts like that and all of the articles that have been written about this in the last 6 months about how this is going to be a watershed moment for the real estate industry, you can see why there's been some confusion for buyers and sellers, and that confusion has probably led to friction, which is really just making it more difficult for buyers and sellers. So I hope going through this and actually looking at the real rules will bring some clarity for you. If you want to talk to me more about this, I invite you to call, text, email. You can hit the QR code. That'll take you to our website where you can find more of our videos, including our contact information. If you want to work with me, whether you're a buyer or a seller in Oregon or Washington, get in touch. And if you want to see more videos about what it's like to live in Oregon, make sure and subscribe. Until next time, take care, everyone.